I almost didn't make it. I want to start there, not for drama, not for the version of that sentence that gets turned into a poster with a sunset behind it and sold as inspiration. I mean it in the flattest, most literal, most honest way I know how to say it. There were moments, specific moments, not metaphorical darkness, not the poetic version of struggle that sounds noble in retrospect. Actual moments where the distance between continuing and not continuing was smaller than anyone around me knew. Where the thing I was trying to build was so far from working, and the resources were so close to gone, and the people who were supposed to believe had stopped believing, and the voice inside me that had always said, keep going, had gone quiet in a way that felt permanent. Those moments were real, and I fought through them, not gracefully, not with a composed certainty that gets projected onto successful people after the fact. When the story has been cleaned up and the narrative arc has been identified, and the struggle has been reframed as the necessary and noble precursor to the triumph. Not like that. I fought through them messily and desperately, and sometimes without any clear reason except that stopping felt like a betrayal of something I couldn't fully name. And I want to tell you about that fight today. Not the version that has been told, not the version that fits the existing narrative about who I am or what I represent or what my story is supposed to mean. The version underneath that, the one that doesn't have a clean arc, the one that is still, in some ways, ongoing, the one that I think might be closer to your experience than the polished version ever could be. Because I didn't fight through the darkness for a company. I didn't fight through it for a valuation or a market position or a place in history. I fought through it for the thing the company was supposed to do, for the reason it needed to exist, for the future that could not happen if I stopped, for the people who would be affected in ways they would never fully trace back to this moment, by whether I continued or didn't. I fought through it for you. And I mean that in the most specific, non abstract way possible. For the version of you that exists in a future that is different because someone refused to stop. For the version of you that gets to live in a world where certain things were built that didn't have to be built, where certain problems were solved that could have remained unsolved, where certain possibilities were opened that would have stayed closed if someone, somewhere in a moment of profound difficulty, had decided that the cost was too high. That is who I fought for. And today, I want to tell you why. And more than why, I want to tell you what I learned in the fighting, what the darkness taught me that nothing else could have taught me. What I know now that I only know because I went through the thing that almost ended it. Because that knowledge is not mine to keep. That knowledge is yours. That is why we are here. Let me tell you about the specific texture of real failure, not the sanitized version, not the version where failure is a lesson gift wrapped in difficulty that you open and find wisdom inside. Not that version, the actual version, because I think one of the most damaging things we do to people who are trying to build things, trying to make things, trying to do the difficult work of bringing something into the world that doesn't exist yet is we lie to them about what failure actually feels like from the inside. From the outside, failure has a shape. It has a shape. It has a timeline. It has a beginning and a middle and an end and a lesson. From the outside, you can see where it started and what caused it and what the person should have done differently and what they ultimately learned from it. From the outside, failure is comprehensible. It fits inside a narrative. From the inside, failure has no shape. From the inside, failure is just the water you're in. It doesn't announce itself as failure because from inside it, it might be the last moment before everything turns around, or it might be the beginning of the end, and you cannot tell the difference. From the inside, there is no narrator standing outside the experience explaining what this part means. There is only the experience, the relentless, featureless, no end in sight experience of things not working, of trying something and it not working, of adjusting and trying again and it not working again, of running out of the resource, whether that resource is money or time or energy or the belief of the people around you, of running out and not being able to clearly see where more is coming from. That is what failure actually feels like from the inside. And it is important to know this because if you are in it right now, if you are in the water right now and it has no shape and you cannot see the edge of it, I want you to know that the absence of shape is not evidence that you are failing permanently. The featurelessness of it is not evidence that there is no end. The impossibility of seeing the lesson right now is not evidence that there is no lesson. You are just inside it, which means you are still in it, which means it is not over, which means the only relevant question is what do you do next? I want to tell you about 2008. People have written about 2008 in relation to my life. They've written about it in the context of the financial crisis and the timing and the near death experiences of the companies. They've described the external facts with reasonable accuracy. But the external facts are the skeleton of the story. What I want to tell you about is the interior of it. What it was like to be inside that year from the first person. Tesla was running out of money. SpaceX had just had its third consecutive launch failure. Three attempts to reach orbit and three failures. The Falcon 1 rocket, which represented years of work and every calculation we had made, and the belief of every person who had joined this company on the basis of my conviction that this was possible, had failed three times. And I want to be precise about what three failures means. It means that three times you built the thing, three times you loaded the thing, three times you stood there and watched and hoped and had the moment where everything looks like it might work, and then the moment where it doesn't work. And then you did not have the option of walking away because walking away meant that the thing was over, the dream was over, the future that this was all in service of was over. So you started again, you went back to the data, you found the failure mode, you understood what went wrong. You told your team, who were exhausted and some of whom were beginning to doubt, and some of whom were beginning to doubt, and some of whom had families and mortgages and options to go elsewhere and were making a genuine sacrifice by staying. You told them what you found and you asked them to go again. Three times. And then in September of 2008, the fourth launch. And I will tell you what it felt like to watch that fourth launch succeed, not triumph, not vindication, not the movie version of the moment. I will tell you what it actually felt like. It felt like the floor coming back. That's the closest I can get. It felt like I had been standing in a place where the floor had been steadily disappearing for a very long time. And suddenly, for the first time in years, there was so mothering solid under my feet. Not success, not arrival, just the floor, just the basic foundation of this is real and this works and this can continue. And I stood there and I felt something that I did not expect to feel in a moment that should have been purely positive. I felt the weight of how close it had been, the full weight of it, the understanding which had been pushed to the periphery during the building and the launching and the failing and the rebuilding because you cannot do the work if you are fully feeling how close to the edge you are. The full understanding landed in that moment of success of how close it had been to not happening. And that understanding has never left me. The understanding that the future is not guaranteed, that the things that now exist that are now simply part of the world, that people now take for granted as simply having been inevitable, were not inevitable. Were contingent, were dependent on a series of decisions made by exhausted people in difficult moments who had every reason to stop and chose not to. Everything that exists was once not inevitable, including you, including whatever you're trying to build, including whatever future you are fighting for. It is not inevitable. That is not a discouraging statement. That is the most important and the most motivating statement I know. Because if it is not inevitable, then your choices matter. Then the decision you make today, in whatever difficult moment you are in, is load bearing, is real, is the difference between a future that contains your thing and a future that doesn't. Your choices are making the future. Right now, in this moment that doesn't feel significant, in this moment that doesn't feel significant, in this moment that feels like just another hard day in a long series of hard days without clear progress, in this moment where you are not sure it's working and you are tired, and the gap between where you are and where you need to be feels enormous. This moment is making the future. Do not underestimate this moment. I want to talk about the thing I've been most wrong about in my life. Because I've been wrong about things. Significantly wrong, not just tactically wrong, not just a wrong that comes from having incomplete information and making the best decision available, but wrong in ways that reflect something about how I was seeing the world that needed to be corrected. The most significant thing I've been wrong about is the cost that the pursuit extracts from other people. I want to say that plainly without softening it or reframing it or making it fit more comfortably into a narrative about the necessary sacrifices of great ambition. Just plainly, when you are pursuing something at the level I have pursued things, when the mission has the weight and urgency and scale that I have operated under, it is easy, it is almost inevitable to begin treating the people around you as resources in service of the mission rather than as ends in themselves. To begin calculating everything, including relationships, in terms of their utility to the thing being built, to begin to lose the ability to be fully present with the human beings in your life because your mind is always somewhere else, always in the problem, always in the next obstacle, always in the gap between where you are and where you need to be. And the people who love you feel that. They feel the absence. They feel themselves being weighed against the mission and found to be less urgent. They feel the thing that is hardest to name and hardest to recover from, which is the specific loneliness of being physically present with someone and completely out of reach of them. I have created that experience in people I cared about. I'm not going to pretend that I have fully resolved this or that I have found the clean answer to the question of how you pursue things at this scale without that cost. I don't have the clean answer. I'm not sure the clean answer exists. But what I know is that the acknowledgement matters, the seeing of it matters, the refusal to file it under the necessary cost of great work and stop looking at it. That refusal matters. The willingness to hold the tension between the importance of what you are building and the equal and non negotiable importance of the people in your life, and to not resolve that tension by simply declaring one side more important that matters. The mission is real. The people are also real. Both of these things are true simultaneously, and the difficulty of holding both does not make either one less true. I tell you this because I think there are people listening to this who are in the pursuit, who have given themselves to something, who are fighting through their own darkness for their own darkness, for their own version of the future that needs to exist. And I want to say to those people, from the specific experience of someone who has been in this for decades, do not let the mission consume your humanity. Because here's what the mission is actually for: the mission is for people. Whatever the mission is, whatever the thing you are building or solving or changing, at the end of all of it, it is for people. It is for the human beings who will be affected by whether it succeeds. And if in the pursuit of the mission you lose your ability to be fully human, to be present, to be connected, to be affected by the people directly in front of you, then you have built a strange and troubling paradox. You have sacrificed the human to serve humanity, and I don't think that's the only way. I think there is a version of the pursuit that is fully committed and fully human simultaneously. I think it is harder than the version where you simply let the mission consume everything, but I think it is the version worth trying for them, for the people in your life who deserve the whole of you, not just the part that is left over after everything else has been attended to. Now I want to talk about the darkness in a different way. I've been talking about external darkness, the darkness of failure and resource scarcity and the near death of the thing you're building. But there is another darkness, one that is less discussed in the context of people who are seen as successful or visionary or whatever other words get put around the outside of a person's life to make it look coherent. The interior darkness, the doubt that lives inside the certainty. Because here is something that is true about me and that I think is true about most people who project certainty and conviction and the appearance of unwavering belief in what they are doing. The certainty is real, and the doubt is also real, simultaneously, in the same person, in the same moment sometimes. I've stood in front of people and spoken about the future with complete conviction, and that conviction was true. I genuinely believed what I was saying, and underneath it, or alongside it, or sometimes in the very same breath, was a doubt that was also genuine. The doubt that asks, what if you are wrong about this? What if the calculation is off? What if the thing you have given everything to, that has cost the people around you so much, what if it doesn't work? What if the future you are building toward is not the right future? What if you are the one thing standing between the world and a better version of this that someone less certain and more flexible would have found by now? That doubt is not weakness. I have come to believe that that doubt is a feature, not a bug. The doubt is the thing that keeps you honest. It is the thing that keeps you looking at the data even when the data is inconvenient. It is the thing that keeps you willing to change the approach when the approach is not working, rather than defending the approach because you committed to it publicly. The doubt is what keeps the certainty from becoming dogma, what keeps the vision from becoming a prison. The people who scare me are not the people with doubt. The people who scare me are the people with no doubt. The ones for whom the conviction has calcified into absolute certainty that admits no revision, because the world is complex and changing and full of information that does not confirm your existing understanding of it. And if you cannot receive that information because you have no doubt left, you cannot course correct. Keep your doubt, not as a reason to stop, as a tool for going better. I want to tell you what I actually believe about why things get built, about why the hard things, the genuinely hard things that required enormous sacrifice and enormous persistence and the willingness to fail and fail and fail again, why they get built by specific people rather than by everyone who had the idea or the intelligence or the resources. I think the things get built by the people who cannot find a way to stop, not the people who are most talented, not the people who are most talented, not the people who started with the most resources, not the people who had the clearest path or the most support or the fewest obstacles. The people who could not find a way to stop, who tried to stop and found that stopping was actually harder than continuing, who found that the cost of abandonment was higher than the cost of persistence, even when persistence was brutal. That is not a romantic quality. I am not describing romantic heroism. I am describing something closer to a compulsion, a deep structural, sometimes uncomfortable compulsion toward the thing that needs to be built, an inability to be at peace with the world that does not contain the thing. And the question I want to ask you is whether you have that, not whether you have the talent, not whether you have the talent, not whether you have the resources, not whether the path is clear or the support is present or the obstacles are manageable, whether you have the thing that makes stopping harder than continuing. Because if you have that, then the darkness is not the end. The darkness is just a condition you are moving through. It has an end even when you cannot see the end. The path continues even when you cannot see the path. Because you are the kind of person who keeps walking even in the dark. And I want to talk about what keeps you walking. Because it is not willpower. I want to be very clear about this because we have a cultural story about willpower and grit and the grinding persistence of the self made person that I think is actually harmful to people who are in the difficulty. Because willpower runs out, grit depletes. The grinding self is not an infinite resource. If you are relying on willpower alone to get through the darkness will outlast the willpower. What actually keeps you walking is meaning, specifically the clarity of why, the understanding of what you are actually fighting for, not abstractly, not in the language of mission statements and vision decks, but specifically, viscerally, in the way that lands in the body and not just the mind. The understanding that is so clear and so personal that it does not require external reinforcement, that you can access in the 3 a.m. dark when nothing is working and the doubt is loudest and the reasons to stop have never seemed more reasonable. What are you fighting for? I've spent a lot of years being able to answer that question in technical terms, in technical terms, in terms of the problems being solved and the futures being enabled and the specific mechanisms by which the thing I am yielding makes the things I care about more possible. But underneath the technical answer is a simpler one. I am fighting for the version of the future where the things that should not limit human potential do not limit human potential, where the accident of your birth, the geography of it, the economic conditions of it, the moment in history of it does not determine the ceiling of what your life can contain. Where the problems that have seemed permanent because they have been present for so long are revealed as not permanent but merely unsolved. Where the next generation looks back at the problems we accepted as fixed and finds them as strange and unnecessary as we find the problems that previous generations accepted as fixed. That future is why. That is what I was fighting for in 2008. That is what I am still fighting for. And here's the thing about that future that makes the fighting possible even when the fighting is brutal. It is not for me. The future I am fighting for is not one. I will fully inhabit the changes move slowly in the way that civilization scale changes move slowly. The full effect of the things being built now will be felt by people who are not born yet, by generations that do not exist, by versions of humanity that are not yet possible. I will not see the full thing, and that is not a discouraging thought. That is the most freeing thought I have, because it means the work is not about me. My comfort is not the relevant variable. My timeline is not the relevant timeline. My need for validation or confirmation or the satisfaction of seeing the thing complete. Those needs are real and human, and I am not going to pretend they don't exist, but they are not what the work is for. The work is for the future, and the future is for you. That is what I mean when I say I fought through the darkness for you. Not you as audience. Not you as consumer of the thing I am building. You as the person who is going to live in the world that is made by whether people like us, people who are in the difficulty right now, decide to keep going or decide to stop. You are why, your life, the life you are going to live, the life your children are going to live, the specific quality of the future that is available to people who are not yet born. That is what the fighting is for. And if you are fighting your own version of this, if you are in your own darkness, your own 2008, your own third consecutive failure, your own moment where the reasons to stop have never seemed more reasonable, I want to say this to you. The future is watching, not metaphorically, in the most literal sense possible. The people who will live in the world your persistence makes possible are watching. They don't exist yet. You can't see them. They cannot tell you to keep going because they don't have voices yet, but they need you to keep going. The version of the future where your thing exists and works and changes the specific thing it is supposed to change, that future contains people who need it. Real people. People who will be affected in ways you cannot fully trace from here. People who will have possibilities that would not have existed if you stopped. Keep going for them. Keep going on the days when the reasons to stop are loudest. Keep going when the reasons to stop are loudest. Keep going when the reasons are running out. Keep going when the people who were supposed to believe have stopped believing. Keep going when you cannot see the path. Keep going when the darkness has no shape and no end, and you cannot tell if this is the last moment before everything turns or the beginning of the end. Keep going, because I kept going, and I kept going for the same reason I am asking you to keep going. Because the future is not made by the people who stop. The future is made by the people who stop. The future is made by the people, Plia, who cannot find a way to. And I believe with the specific certainty that has survived every doubt and every failure and every 3 a.m. where the doubt was loudest. I believe that you are one of those people. You found this. You are still here. You are still asking the question, which means you already know the answer. Keep going. The future is waiting.